So we've had a lot of input this afternoon, and I'd like to open the floor now for questions and comments, and we will find out whether you have been listening to Professor Sikat. Poch.
Professor Williamson started a series of lectures with the point that three things determine the fate of economies like the Philippines: culture, institutions, and geography. With the tsunami, earthquake, geography looms to be a critical factor in the future. How prepared we are, nobody knows. But the institutions that Professor Sikat refers to, a feudal economy, I think deserves a fresh look from economists, since economics has moved away from a science of scarcity to a science of governance and contracts. When Oliver Williamson won the Nobel Prize with Elinor Ostrom, the focus on institutions was apropos this trend. And I think your work, Professor Williamson, is along those lines of looking deep at not only the historical but the governance aspects. Are there things in history that will tell the Philippines there's hope for a feudal society in a 21st century setting? What worries us is that we are Johnny-come-latelys in a region that has moved so far ahead of us that we are really so late in almost everything, including our thinkers who still think of policies appropriate to 50 or 60 years ago.
Well, Poch, of course, the farther away, the greater the distance, economic distance between you and your neighbors, the better you will gain by that distance. The better the technology that can be imported and transferred, the better the skills that can be returned home as soon as the demand is there. So the geography certainly does favor the Philippines, big time. You got two big bricks next door, and little bricks like Singapore around about. And all this country has to do is just exploit it. I think Jerry is right. If they can get the government and the institutions right, I think this country will grow faster than Mao's China did. I am certain of that, given all the other conditions are so satisfactory. Yeah, I think geography really favors this country much more than it did in the last century. This century really does. And so will that, and when we look at the experience with institutional change in other countries, which started off with a bad set of institutions and culture in the sense of not permitting rapid growth, they were overcome. They all managed to overcome them. There will be some kind of transformation. Just don't know when, but right now, what rich politician, what's the incentive to listen to you? They'll listen and then forget you. There's no incentive unless they're benign.
One incentive is that I think they also look at the social index, the social fervor index, and if they see what happens in countries, what happened in the mid 1980s is an indication of that. There was a boiling point, but the boiling point was fed by a different kind of event, an assassination, and it was led by different kinds of groups, people who were deprived of the changes that were happening, and they were basically from Manila and so on. It was a middle class kind of revolution. It's not the kind you observe in Tunisia that happened recently, or the one that you see in the Middle East. Perhaps that kind of index of social conditions might make some of them listen. And you need only one leader who can think one way to correct the problem so that you can open the door. That's why I'm optimistic about the long-run future, but not in the next few years.
Linda, I'm going to give you a chance, but I just want to say that when the Philippines was surrounded by poor countries, there was not much external incentive to change, and now it's surrounded by richer countries, and there may be more. So maybe leaders will get embarrassed at some point
That's right.
by the relative position of the Philippines.